That's what you get for being so selfish. A woman your age doesn't need so much space. You're not welcome here anymore. Ethan and I need our privacy.
Takat echoed through the Royal Oaks ballroom like a gunshot. I hadn't expected this at all. One moment, I was clutching my worn black bag tightly, trying to maintain my composure. The next, my glasses flew across the polished floor and shattered on the marble, their sound drowning out the music and the chatter of 130 wedding guests. My cheek was burning, but the pain in my chest, that suffocating, crushing weight, was far worse. "This is what happens to you for being selfish," Julia shouted, her voice tearing through the sudden, absolute silence. The pure white lace dress, which cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months, swirled around her as she turned to face the crowd. A woman your age doesn't need this much space. Before we dive deeper into this journey, I have a small request. Please press the subscribe button, like this video, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we listen to each other. Each of you has a story waiting to be told in your heart. Maybe your story will be a balm for someone else's wound. If you have a story you've been keeping inside, you can send it to the email address in the description section. Because sometimes the first step toward healing is simply to share. Let's go back to the beginning, because every strong ending deserves a fitting origin story. My name is Aurora Hughes. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I've been a woman who preferred common sense over glamour. For the past 15 years, I've worked 3 days a week at Miller's Flower Shop on Main Street. I drive a 2015 Honda Civic, which has a dent on the passenger door from when I hit a shopping cart in a supermarket parking lot. I buy my clothes from discount stores, mostly during end-of-season sales. To the outside world, especially to Juliet, I am just a middle-class widow living on a fixed income. But this is nothing more than the image I've carefully crafted over the years. None of the 130 wedding guests who looked at me with pity knew that my life was completely different before my husband passed away. Robert wasn't an office worker, as everyone bought. Years ago, we had decided to live a modest life. We had decided to keep our real wealth hidden. We had decided to protect our family's privacy. Now I understand that this decision was prophetic. As I left that ballroom, holding my broken glasses in one hand, my pride shattered, I heard their whispers trailing behind me like a poisonous cloud. "Poor thing, she looks so fragile. The bride is right, that woman can't take care of herself anymore. She shouldn't live alone in that big apartment, she should go to a nursing home." Every word felt like acid poured on open wounds. When I stepped out into the hallway through the double doors, the ballroom's air conditioning hit my tear-stained face. My hands were shaking as I searched for my cell phone in my bag. The same worn black bag I'd carried for 5 years. Not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I'd learned to value practicality over appearance. This was something Juliet would never understand. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't used in over a year, because I had naively hoped it would never be necessary. "Carlos, it's Aurora." My voice was trembling, but something steel-hard was forming inside me. "You need to come to the Royal Oaks Ballroom. Right now. Immediately. Bring the documents you know about. It's time they learn the truth." There was silence on the other end. Carlos Martinez had been handling my finances since Robert's death 5 years ago. What's more, he had been Robert's closest friend since college, the only person outside our marriage who knew the full extent of what we had built. "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes?" There was professional concern in his voice. "If we do this once, there's no going back. You understand that, don't you?" I glanced at the ballroom one last time. Through the glass door, I could see Juliet laughing with her bridesmaids, probably recounting her victory over the useless old woman. Ethan stood beside her, his arm around her waist, a faint smile on his face, showing not the slightest hint of regret for what he had just witnessed. "I'm absolutely certain," I said, my voice sounding firmer than I felt. 30 minutes, Carlos, no more." I hung up the phone and walked toward the parking lot with measured steps. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, their lives would change forever. Within 30 minutes, they would realize they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by humiliating the woman who had been watching them in secret, beyond their wildest imagination. The parking lot was quiet, street lights casting long shadows between the cars. I sat in my old Honda, which Juliet once called embarrassingly outdated, and let my memories flow. Not good memories. They were too painful. Warning signs, red flags I chose to ignore because I wanted to believe my son was still out there somewhere, buried beneath the layers of manipulation Juliet had wrapped him in. It all began exactly 2.5 years ago. "Mom, I want to introduce you to someone very special." Ethan had that tense smile I'd known since childhood, the one that appeared when he wanted something but didn't know how to ask for it. He was standing at my apartment door, and behind him I saw her for the first time. Juliet, 28 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget, designer clothes, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and her gaze, which assessed every corner of my apartment with a subtle disdain, told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. "How?" he murmured, his gaze sweeping over my secondhand furniture, faded curtains, and family photos in mismatched frames above the fireplace. His tone implied the exact opposite. Ethan, oblivious to the contempt dripping from every word, smiled at him as if he had just paid me the greatest compliment. That first dinner was a silent disaster. Juliet barely touched the casserole I'd spent all afternoon preparing, making excuses about not wanting to gain weight. When I asked about her family, she gave vague, evasive answers, but she didn't hesitate to pry into my financial situation, setting off alarm bells in my head. "How do you get by on a widow's pension, Aurora?" She stirred her nearly untouched meal, her eyes fixed on me with a sharp gaze despite the feigned concern in her voice. "It must be very difficult to get by on so little money. Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller? This apartment seems too big for one person." What Juliet didn't know was that I was observing her just as carefully as she was observing me. Over the next few months, I began to notice certain patterns. Every time she visited, she would comment on how old everything in my apartment was. She would say I deserved better in my golden years. But her eyes always lingered on the details that really mattered. The perfect location of my building, the panoramic view from my balcony, the size of the rooms in this pre-war apartment, which would be worth a fortune in today's market. Then one day I overheard her on the phone. Ethan had asked permission to go to the bathroom. Juliet thought I was in the kitchen and couldn't hear her, but my apartment had perfect acoustics, and her voice carried. "Yes, Mom, her apartment is in a very expensive area. If I can convince her to live in a nursing home, we can stay here until we're ready to buy our own place. She's so naive, she'll probably even thank us for helping her through this transition." Those words cut me like a knife. But when she returned to the living room with an innocent expression and a perfect smile, I maintained my composure. From that moment on, every interaction with Juliet became a carefully planned game for both of us. She played the role of the concerned daughter-in-law, worried about her poor mother-in-law's health. And me, I played the role of the vulnerable elderly woman in need of guidance. But inside, I was gathering information. I was observing. I was trying to understand her true purpose. It was like a chess game where we both thought we had won. I was sitting in my car, watching the golden light seeping through the ballroom windows, listening to the faint sounds of the celebrations continuing as if nothing had happened, as if the bride hadn't physically attacked her mother-in-law in front of 130 witnesses. My phone rang. A message had come from my apartment neighbor, Joseph. "Aurora, are you okay? I saw you leave the wedding early. Call me if you need anything." Joseph was 70 years old, widowed like me, and had been a silent witness to all the tense visits over the past few months. He had seen Juliet bring in a real estate appraiser to inspect her apartment without my permission. He had noticed how Ethan's visits had transformed from those of a loving son to those of a calculating businessman. I replied, "I'm fine, Joseph, but I have a favor to ask. Could you go to my house and get the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk? Let's meet at the ballroom parking lot. It's urgent." His reply came immediately. "I'm on my way." The brown folder. The folder containing documents that no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property deeds, investment records that Robert and I had kept secret for decades. Documents proving that the poor widow living on a fixed income was actually a woman with enough resources to change their lives with a single decision. My phone rang again. This time, it was a message from Lucy, Ethan's younger sister, my niece, and one of the few family members I still trusted. "Aunt Aurora, I just heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were planning this. Where are you?" I replied, "In the parking lot. Don't worry about me, sweetie. But Lucy, everything you know about your brother is about to change. I want you to trust me." "I always trust you. What can I do?" "Be there tomorrow morning. Richard Sterling's law office, 9 a.m. Can you make it?" "I'll be there." Lucy had always been different from Ethan. While Ethan drifted away after college and became a materialistic person, Lucy remained grounded. She was a teacher, lived a modest life, and still visited me every Sunday for dinner. If anyone in this family deserved to know what was really going on, it was Lucy. The headlights illuminated the parking lot. Joseph's old truck pulled up next to my Honda. He got out of the car, a brown folder in his hand, a worried look on his face. "Aurora, what's going on?" He handed me the documents through my open window. "You look upset, more than upset. You look dangerous." I almost smiled at that. "Joseph, a man named Carlos Martinez will be here in a few minutes. When you see him, tell him I'm waiting here. And Joseph," I looked into his eyes, "a lot will change after tonight. I want you to know that you've always been like family to me." His eyes filled with tears. He squeezed my hand through the window. "You're family to me too, Aurora. Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. I always have been." As Joseph walked toward his truck, I opened the brown folder. The first document was a bank statement showing a balance of $5.4 million in an investment account opened under my maiden name. The second was the deed to an office building in the city center, generating a monthly rental income of $50,000. The third was the deed to a beach house I had purchased 10 years ago for investment purposes, now worth over $2 million. Robert was a genius when it came to investing. What began as a small import business in the 1980s had quietly grown into an empire. Together, we had decided to live modestly, protect our privacy, and shield ourselves and our family from the problems that visible wealth attracts. "Visible wealth attracts problems," Robert would say, draping his arm over my shoulder in this very car as we parked in front of this venue for someone else's wedding years ago. But invisible wealth? That gives you power, real power, the kind of power that matters when you need it most. I never thought I would need that power against my own son. But here we were. Every document in this folder was the result of years of hard work, smart decisions, and careful planning. I chose to work at the flower shop not because I needed the money, but because I loved staying active, connecting with my community, and being involved in life. My old car wasn't due to financial constraints, but because Robert and I had learned that unnecessary ostentation only attracted unwanted attention. The apartment Juliet wanted so badly was actually my least valuable asset. I kept it not for its market value, but for the memories. It was where Robert and I spent our last years together. It was where we planned our future. It was where she died in my arms after bravely battling pancreatic cancer. But there was something else in that folder, something that would devastate Ethan even more than losing the apartment. For the past 3 years, since he started having financial difficulties that he was too proud to talk to me about, I had been secretly paying off most of his debts. Credit card payments he thought came from work bonuses? It was my money. The special discount the landlord gave on rent? I was the one making the extra $1,500 monthly payments directly to the building management. The car he was using? It was bought on credit, but I was covering 60% of the monthly payments. Even part of the wedding expenses, flowers, photography, the rehearsal dinner, were quietly subsidized through transfers to vendors who thought the groom's family was paying. Without his knowledge, I had been keeping Ethan's life afloat for years, and he had slapped me, metaphorically, through his wife, and literally through his inaction. Bank records showed monthly transfers totaling $4,500 that had saved my son from going under due to his own irresponsible decisions. My son believed this money came from raises, bonuses, and tax refunds. This ironic situation was devastating. While Juliet belittled me for being an economic burden, I was the only reason they could maintain their lifestyle. While they planned to take my apartment away to solve their financial problems, I had been secretly solving those problems for years. I closed the folder and looked at the ballroom once more. Carlos would be here in 5 minutes. There were 5 minutes left before I severed all the financial ties holding my son's life together. Ethan and Juliet were 5 minutes away from learning that the poor, helpless old woman they had ruined in front of 130 people was actually the source of everything they owned. Headlights. Another car was pulling into the parking spot, a sleek black Mercedes that could only belong to one person. Carlos Martinez stepped out tall and stylish in his suit, a leather briefcase under his arm. He looked 65. Every inch the successful financial advisor. But I knew him better. I knew the college student who borrowed money from Robert to start his first business. He was the best man at our wedding. He was our son's godfather, though Ethan barely remembered that connection anymore. Mrs. Hughes, he approached my car, a serious expression on his face. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we go in there, once those documents come out, we can't take back what happens next. I got out of the Honda and straightened my dress, the simple navy dress I wore to Robert's funeral 5 years ago, because it was the most beautiful dress I owned, or rather, the most beautiful dress I allowed people to think I owned. I've never been so certain about anything in my life, Carlos. He studied my face for a long time, then slowly shook his head. Then let's go remind them why they shouldn't underestimate Aurora Hughes. We walked together toward the ballroom entrance, my back straighter than it had been in months, my head held high despite my broken glasses and tear-stained face. As we entered the door, the music suddenly stopped. 130 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Juliet froze in the middle of the dance floor, her face falling when she recognized Carlos. She knew his reputation, as did everyone in the financial world. Carlos Martinez didn't attend social events unless it was a serious occasion. What are you doing here, Aurora? Juliet's voice was high-pitched and tense, despite her attempt to sound authoritative. You already made a dramatic entrance. Wasn't that enough? Ladies and gentlemen, said Carlos in a clear, professional voice that echoed through the quiet ballroom, I apologize for interrupting this celebration. However, I have urgent legal and financial matters to discuss with Ethan Hughes and Juliet Dawson. His use of Juliet's maiden name, not Mrs. Hughes, was deliberate. It was a subtle message that Carlos did not recognize this marriage. Not yet. Ethan approached us, his face pale, showing signs of shock and initial fear. What's going on, Mom? Who is this man, and why is he talking about legal matters at my wedding? I could see his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his bow tie, a gesture he'd made since childhood. Some things never change, no matter how much else does. Ethan, I said, my voice calm and cold, this is Carlos Martinez. He's been my financial and legal advisor for the past 5 years. He's also your godfather, though I don't think you remember that. He's here to bring you some documents I think you'll find very enlightening. Carlos opened his briefcase with his usual efficiency. Mr. Ethan Hughes, he began, pulling out the first document. You are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your mother provided for your lease at 445 Park Avenue has been immediately revoked. Your landlord will receive official notification tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property. Ethan's face paled instantly. Financial? Guarantee? The words came out in a whisper. Mom, what does that mean? But I could tell from his eyes that he already knew part of it. For 3 years, he had suspected that his financial luck wasn't entirely natural. He had chosen not to ask questions because the answers might be uncomfortable. Furthermore, Carlos continued, the monthly transfers of $4,500 your mother made to your personal accounts, which you thought covered credit card payments, car insurance, and various other expenses from other sources, have been immediately and permanently stopped. Juliet let out a scream that echoed through the ballroom. Her expensive high heels clacking on the marble floor, she stumbled, her wedding dress trailing behind her. This is impossible, her voice cracked hysterically. Ethan doesn't have a rich mother. Look at him. Look at how he lives. His clothes, his car, his job. He's just an old woman living on a meager pension. Finally, said Carlos, carefully removing the last document from his bag as if a surgeon were removing a tumor. The guaranteed payment for tonight's celebration, the venue, catering, music, flowers, and photography, totaling $53,000, has also been canceled. The Royal Oaks management will have the right to demand full payment before allowing guests to leave the premises tonight. These words fell like a bomb in the ballroom. A few guests immediately started moving toward the exits, pulling out their phones, likely checking their own financial situations, wondering if they would be held responsible in some way. Ethan was just staring at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. You? He finally said, his voice trembling. All this time, you were paying for everything. For 3 years, Ethan, I confirmed, my voice eerily calm. For 3 years, I thought I was helping you overcome temporary difficulties. For 3 years, I believed you would eventually recover and remember the values I taught you. For 3 years, I hoped my son was still out there somewhere. I paused for a moment, waiting for the weight of those words to settle on everyone in the room. I was wrong. Juliet put her hands to her head and began tracing circles, her perfect wedding hairstyle falling apart. This can't be. This can't be real. Her voice rose to a scream, and several guests flinched. You're just a poor old woman. You work at a florist. You drive a junk car. You couldn't possibly have that much money. Appearances, I said quietly, feeling decades of careful behavior coming to an end, are often deceiving, Juliet. For years, my husband and I chose to live simply because we believed the problems of visible wealth would follow us. It turns out we were right. We just didn't expect the problems to come from our own family. The ballroom was completely silent except for Juliet's irregular breathing and the soft buzz of phones recording every moment. I could see awareness spreading across faces. This wasn't just a family drama. This was a story to be shared, discussed, and dissected for weeks. Some had already started typing furiously, likely sharing it on social media. Fine, let them do it. Mom, Ethan's voice cracked, and for a moment, just a second, I saw the little boy he used to be, vulnerable, confused, lost. Please, there has to be a way to fix this. The wedding, the guests, everything. The only way to fix this, Ethan, I cut him off, my voice harsher than it had ever been with him, was not to break it in the first place. Then there was complete silence. Carlos cleared his throat. Mrs. Hughes, for everyone's benefit, would you like me to continue reading all the financial details? His question hung in the air like a sword over the newlyweds' heads. I could see a few guests leaning forward, mesmerized despite themselves. This was better than any reality TV show. and it was happening right in front of them. "Please, Carlos," I replied, with an almost surreal calm. "I think everyone deserves to know the whole truth." Juliet tried to interrupt with a helpless voice, half scream, half sob, but Carlos just raised his hand and continued with sensitivity. "Over the last 36 months," Carlos began, looking at his documents with professional impartiality, "Miss Aurora Hughes transferred a total of $162,000 to cover living expenses for her son, Ethan Hughes, and his fiancée, now wife. Of this amount, $48,000 was for rent assistance, $44,000 for credit card debt payments, $18,000 for vehicle insurance and financing, and $22,000 was spent on medical bills, utilities, and various expenses that Mr. Hughes considered business bonuses." A collective gasp rose from the ballroom. I saw some guests pull out the calculators on their phones to verify the calculations. Others were exchanging shocked glances. Juliet's mother, the arrogant woman who had been shooting me sarcastic looks from the head table all evening, slowly stood up, her face completely drained of color. "Furthermore," Carlos continued without pause, "Miss Hughes personally guaranteed the total cost of tonight's celebration, including venue rental, catering, music, flower arrangements, and photography services, at $53,000. As I mentioned earlier, these funds are no longer available to cover these expenses." "That's a lie!" Juliet found her voice again, but it was more like a scream than actual words. "No one with that kind of money could live like a pauper. It's impossible." She turned to the guests as if seeking support, but saw only admiring faces. Some were clearly enjoying themselves, others sympathized with me, and a few were calculating what this meant for their relationships with their aging parents. "Dear Juliet," I said, my voice reaching the other end of the room with unexpected power, "you've learned a valuable lesson about judging people by appearances. For decades, my husband Robert and I have valued privacy over ostentation. We chose common sense over ostentation. We built something real and lasting, not a facade supported by credit cards and borrowed money. It was a very wise decision." Ethan finally moved, approaching me with hesitant steps, extending his hands as if to touch me, then lowering them again. "Mom, please. There must be an explanation. There must be a way to fix this. So you can't ruin my life like this." His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, a very brief moment, I felt a mother's love that almost made me hesitate. "Almost? Ruining your life?" I repeated, feeling my anger rising again. "Am I ruining your life? Wasn't it your wife who slapped me in front of 130 witnesses? Wasn't it you who watched silently while I was humiliated? Wasn't it the two of you who spent months plotting to deprive me of my home, my honor, my freedom?" The truth of my words echoed through the ballroom like church bells. A few guests were now shaking their heads, clearly remembering the slap that started this whole conflict. I could see the phones were still recording, digital proof of Juliet's attack, a permanent record of everything that happened. "But she was different," Ethan stammered, though his voice held no persuasive power. "We didn't know. We didn't understand. We truly thought you needed help." "You didn't know?" My voice rose for the first time all evening. "You didn't know she planned a family intervention to force me to sell my house? You didn't know Juliet brought the real estate appraiser to my building without my permission? You didn't know she was looking into legal proceedings to have me declared mentally incompetent if I didn't cooperate?" With each question, Ethan seemed to physically shrink. Some guests exchanged disgusted glances. Others were frantically typing on their phones. Carlos seized the moment and pulled another document from his briefcase. "Mr. Hughes, I must also inform you that your mother has decided to change her last will and testament. All assets previously designated as your inheritance, including approximately $12 million worth of real estate, investments, and liquid assets, have been transferred to charities dedicated to protecting the elderly from financial abuse by their families. The impact of this revelation was like a silent explosion. Juliet staggered backward, bringing her hand to her throat as if she couldn't breathe. "You can't do this!" Her scream was almost inhuman. "We are your family. Ethan is your only son. You can't disinherit him over a stupid fight." "A stupid fight?" My words hung in the tense air. "Is that how you describe a conspiracy planned to swindle an elderly widow out of her home? Is that how you justify physically attacking your wife's mother on your wedding day?" My voice was icy, and I could see a few guests actually stepping back. Juliet's father, the burly man who had participated in the intervention 3 months earlier and tried to force me into selling, finally approached me with a poorly concealed look of panic. "Mrs. Hughes," he said, his voice taking on a conciliatory tone, "I think emotions are running high. Perhaps we can discuss this privately once everyone has calmed down." "There's nothing to discuss privately," I replied sharply. "I said everything I wanted to say here, in front of the same people who witnessed my humiliation. You chose to make this public. My response will be public as well." Carlos snapped his briefcase shut with a sharp sound that echoed through the ballroom. "Miss Hughes, all documents have been officially submitted and disclosed. The legal consequences begin immediately." He turned to Ethan and Juliet with a professional expression that somehow conveyed deep satisfaction. "I strongly advise you to contact your own legal and financial advisors as soon as possible. You will need them." At that moment, Juliet finally collapsed. She literally fell into a nearby chair, her expensive wedding dress spreading around her like a deflated parachute, and began to cry uncontrollably, sobbing. "Everything is ruined," she cried out, her makeup running down her face. "Everything we planned, everything we worked for, it's all ruined." "No," I said, approaching her for the first time since I'd slapped her. I stood over her, making her look at me through her tears. "What's ruined are the lies, the manipulation, the lack of respect. What's ruined is the delusion that you can treat people like disposable objects and think there will be no consequences." I paused, meeting his gaze. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, Juliet." Ethan went to his wife and touched her shoulder with a trembling hand. "Juliet, we have to find a way to fix this. There must be something we can do." But even as he spoke, I could see in his eyes that he knew it was too late. Some bridges, once broken, cannot be rebuilt. Some betrayals run too deep to be healed by any apology. "There is a way to fix this, Ethan," I said, looking at him directly for the first time in months without feeling pain. "You can learn from this experience. You can grow. You can become the man I hoped you would be before greed corrupted you." My voice softened a little, not out of forgiveness, but out of a strange sense of closure. "But this growth will have to happen without my financial support, without my apartment, without my inheritance. You'll have to do it the hard way, like everyone else, through your own work, your own choices, your own consequences." The ballroom fell into absolute silence. Everyone present realized they were witnessing the definitive end of a family relationship. Carlos and I turned toward the exit. Behind us, I heard Juliet's sobs growing louder, more desperate. I heard Ethan trying to comfort her with empty words. I heard the guests begin whispering among themselves, still holding their phones, continuing to record. But I didn't look back, not even once. We had almost reached the ballroom doors when a voice stopped us. "Wait! Aunt Aurora, please wait!" When I turned around, I saw Lucy running toward us, tears streaming down her face, the pale pink, ugly wedding dress Juliet had chosen fluttering behind her. "Aunt Aurora," she said breathlessly when she reached us, her voice trembling, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything about what they were planning." "Ethan never told me." "I know, sweetheart," I said gently, placing my hand on her cheek. "You were always different. You never saw people as opportunities to exploit." Lucy shook her head and began to cry even harder. But why didn't you tell us about the money, everything? Why did you keep it all a secret for so many years? It was a fair question, an honest question. She deserved an honest answer. Because your Uncle Robert and I learned something very important in the early years of our marriage, I explained, noticing a few guests drawing closer to listen. We learned that money changes people. We saw families torn apart over inheritance disputes. We saw friendships end over loans. We saw children who began to see their parents not as people, but as walking bank accounts. I glanced at Ethan, who stood motionless, watching us. We decided to live a simple life to protect our relationships. To be sure, we were loved for who we were, not what we had. We wanted to build something real and lasting, not attract parasites. Lucy slowly shook her head, understanding in her eyes. But Ethan, he was different as a child. He protected you from everyone. What happened to him? The pain in her voice, the pain of a sister watching her brother become unrecognizable, tore at my heart. What happened, I said softly, was that he met someone who saw an opportunity. What happened was that he chose greed over values, avarice over love. And I, by secretly paying his debts to protect him, robbed him of the chance to learn important lessons about responsibility and consequences. My words echoed through the ballroom. I could see some guests nodding their heads, understanding the profound lesson here. Mrs. Hughes? A new voice interrupted. A large man in a manager's uniform approached with a serious expression, holding several papers. I'm Derek Martinez, the events manager at Royal Oaks. I received a notice that the payment has been canceled. I need to discuss the arrangements with you. Carlos stepped forward politely. Mr. Martinez, I'm Carlos Martinez, no relation. I'm Mrs. Hughes' legal representative. Due to the extraordinary circumstances that occurred this evening, the financial guarantee she provided has been legally revoked. Derek looked at Ethan and Juliet, assessing the situation with the experienced eye of someone who had managed events for decades. I see. So who will pay the $53,000 balance now? This, Carlos said calmly, is a matter between you and the couple who purchased your services. Ethan staggered forward, a look of helplessness on his face. Mr. Martinez, there's been a misunderstanding. My mother, she can't just cancel the payment like this. We're family. Everything will work out. Young man, Derek interrupted with forced patience, the guarantee was given personally and privately by Mrs. Hughes. She has the right to revoke that guarantee. I need someone who can make an alternative payment immediately, or I'll have to suspend the services and ask all the guests to leave. His ultimatum fell like a final decision. A few more guests, clearly disturbed by the escalating situation, began to move toward the exits. Others, unable to tear their eyes away from this real-life disaster, were frozen by the drama. Juliet rose from her chair, stumbling in her high heels, her wedding dress now disheveled and stained with tears. You can't do this, she yelled at Derek. Today is our wedding day. You can't ruin our wedding over money problems. Ma'am, Derek replied, his voice hardening, I'm not ruining anything. I'm just enforcing the terms of the contract you signed. If you can't make an alternative payment immediately, I have to follow protocol. Mom, Ethan turned to me, his eyes visibly filled with tears, something I had never seen in him since childhood. Please, I know what we did was wrong. I know we hurt you. But there are 130 people here. Photos, memories, our entire future. You can't ruin all of this over one argument. Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions boiling inside me. I'm not destroying anything. You destroyed it the moment you chose greed over love. When you let your wife manipulate you, when you allowed yourself to see your own mother not as a human being, but as an obstacle. When I was being humiliated in public and you stood silently instead of defending me. Each word landed like a physical blow. I could see the realization spreading across his face like poison. But what will we do? The previous arrogance in Juliet's voice was completely gone, replaced by pure panic. How will we pay for this? How will we explain this to everyone? You'll do what all responsible adults do, I replied, my voice hardening again. You'll find ways to earn money honestly. You'll learn to live within your means. Instead of waiting for others to give you what you want, you'll discover what it means to work hard for what you want. Carlos's hand touched my elbow lightly. It was a sign that it was time to go, that everything that needed to be said had been said. Mrs. Hughes, he whispered, the process is complete. There's nothing else we can do here. He was right. Staying any longer would have been cruel, unfair. I wanted justice, not cruelty. Lucy came to me once more and hugged me tightly. Aunt Aurora, I want you to know that no matter what happens to Ethan, I will always respect and love you. Her words soothed my wounded heart, reminding me that not everyone in the family had been corrupted by greed. You will always have my support, Lucy, I replied, and hugged her. Remember this night when you make important decisions in your life. Remember that character is not determined by what we have, but by how we treat the people we should love. She nodded, tears falling onto my shoulder, understanding the lesson unfolding before her eyes. Derek approached again, his professional patience clearly wearing thin. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to find a solution quickly. I have other commitments tonight, and I can't keep the staff here indefinitely without a guarantee of payment. You have my contact information, I said to Ethan and Juliet one last time. When you're ready to have a real conversation about respect, values, and responsibility, when you've learned what it means to earn something on your own, when you look me in the eye and sincerely apologize for what you did tonight, then we can talk. I stood there for a moment, looking into Ethan's eyes. But until that day comes, you'll have to resolve this mess entirely on your own. With those words, even though Carlos and Lucy were walking beside me, I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind us, Juliet's renewed sobs, Ethan's desperate attempts to bargain with Derek, the guests' whispers and recordings, and the complete chaos created by the carefully constructed mask finally collapsing under the weight of its own lies could be heard. But I didn't look back, not even once. When we stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, bringing with it the scent of spring flowers and possibilities. This, Carlos said quietly as we walked toward the parking lot, was the most professionally satisfying moment of my entire career. Despite everything, I was smiling. My apartment had become a haven of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Joseph would stop by every morning, bringing coffee and pastries from Lottie's bakery down the street to make sure I was okay after the event he began calling the night Aurora regained her honor. His visits were comforting, reminding me that my chosen family, who valued me for who I truly was, mattered more than blood ties. The phone kept ringing. Ethan had called 37 times in 3 days, his messages gradually shifting from angry to desperate pleas. Juliet had sent 14 messages, each more hysterical than the last. His family had come to my door twice, demanding that I fix the mess I'd made, but I remained resolutely calm, surprising even myself. I didn't respond. I didn't care. I simply existed in the peaceful space I had created. On the morning of the 3rd day, Carlos arrived with the expected yet utterly devastating news. As I sat on my small balcony drinking tea, the warmth of the spring sun caressing our faces, he said, "Mrs. Hughes, I've received reports from all fronts. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday morning. The building management won't negotiate without your guarantee. The Royal Oaks Ballroom has initiated legal proceedings to collect the $53,000 debt. Their credit cards have been canceled for non-payment. Their cars will also be repossessed next week." "Where are they living now?" I asked, though a voice inside me already knew the answer. "With Juliet's family," Carlos replied, his expression suggesting this arrangement sounded as pleasant as it did. "Apparently, it's a 2-bedroom apartment for 3 people. According to my sources, the situation is extremely tense." As I sipped my tea, I felt an odd emptiness instead of the guilt I should have felt. That afternoon, while watering the plants on my balcony, I saw a familiar car park on the street below. Lucy got out of the car, but she wasn't alone. With her was Amelia Chen, an old friend from the real estate industry who had helped me investigate Ethan and Juliet's finances months ago. And, surprisingly, Joseph emerged from the back seat. "Aurora," Lucy called from the sidewalk, "we need to talk. There are things you need to know." When we arrived at my apartment, there was a look of urgency mixed with concern on their faces, which immediately put me on alert. "Aunt Aurora," Lucy began, pulling out a file that looked uncomfortably formal as she settled into my living room, "I've been doing some research since the wedding night. There are things you need to know before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I asked, trying to stay calm as I poured tea. Amelia cleared her throat. "Aurora, I've spent the last 3 days digging deeper into Ethan and Juliet's finances. What I found goes far beyond what we uncovered before. They've been planning this for over a year, and not haphazardly, but with legal counsel." She opened the folder and showed me the documents that made my stomach churn. I found evidence that Juliet consulted with lawyers specializing in cases involving the mental competency of the elderly. They had a detailed plan to have you declared legally incompetent and take control of all your property through guardianship. Joseph leaned forward with a serious expression. "Aurora, there's more. After you left the ballroom that night, I stayed behind to make sure nothing worse happened. I heard Juliet talking to someone on the phone. She said, 'The old woman ruined everything, but we still have Plan B.'" A chill ran down my spine. Plan B? Lucy squeezed my hand. "Aunt Aurora, they're telling everyone you're senile. Your behavior at the wedding, the accusations, cutting off their money, proof you've lost touch with reality. They're filing a lawsuit to have a judge declare you incapable of managing your own affairs." The magnitude of their betrayal spread before me like an infected wound. It wasn't enough to publicly humiliate me, to conspire to take my home away from me, to manipulate me for months. Now they were trying to use my justified reaction to their cruelty as proof that I was mentally unstable. This was an evil beyond what I could have imagined. "But that's not all," Amelia added, her voice trembling slightly. "I discovered that Juliet has been conducting a systematic smear campaign in your neighborhood. She visited several of your neighbors over the past 2 days and suggested they report any concerning or unstable behavior they observed in you." The calculated nature of her attack took my breath away for a moment. Carlos, who had returned for the meeting we had planned for the afternoon, walked in at that moment and immediately sensed the tension. "Mrs. Hughes, you're already aware of some of the recent developments." The expression on his face was harder and more serious than I had ever seen before. "I have other news that corroborates what your friends have learned. Ethan filed a preliminary petition with the county court yesterday requesting a mental health evaluation due to what he described as irrational behavior and inconsistent financial decisions. He also attached sworn statements from several wedding guests as supporting evidence." "Sworn statements?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "What kind of statements?" Carlos looked at his papers. "Statements describing your unjustified emotional outbursts against an innocent young couple. Statements characterizing your financial decisions as vindictive and destructive. Statements implying that you lost your ability to make rational decisions." Lucy squeezed my hand tighter. "They convinced a few guests to sign the statement. Most of them don't really understand what happened that night. They just saw an old woman attacking the newlyweds and assumed that I'm a bad person," I finished quietly. "But there's good news too," Joseph interjected with a smile that seemed out of place given the gravity of everything else. "Apparently, more people are on your side than they realize." He pulled out his phone and showed me a screen that left me speechless. "Joseph, what's this?" Remember all the guests recording at the wedding? Many of those videos went viral. But Aurora, people aren't seeing an old woman attacking innocent people. They're seeing an honorable woman finally standing up against years of abuse and manipulation. Amelia leaned in to see the phone. Aurora, the comments on these videos are overwhelmingly in your favor. Thousands of people are praising your courage, your dignity, and your decision to set boundaries. Many are sharing stories of abuse against the elderly. Whether you intended it or not, you've become a symbol of resistance. Carlos nodded in agreement. If the cases go to court, this public reaction will be invaluable. When thousands of people applaud the logic and justice of their actions, it's extremely difficult to claim that someone is mentally unstable. I watched the videos from that night on my phone screen, my broken glasses on the floor, Juliet's slap, Carlos handing over the documents, my calm and measured reactions. The comments kept flowing. This woman is my hero. She didn't just stand up, she fought back. My mother went through something similar. I wish she had been this brave. The bride attacked her, and now they want to call her crazy? Unbelievable. Elder abuse is real and everywhere. Thank you for not staying silent. But we need to act fast, Carlos said, pulling my attention back to the urgent matter. If they get a court order for an assessment, even temporarily, your assets could be frozen during the investigation. We need to act before that happens. I stood up and walked over to my desk, where I'd been preparing my own documents for the past 3 days. Then it's a good thing I've been busy, I said, pulling out my own file. I've consulted with several lawyers who specialize in elder abuse. I've documented everything: the intimidating visits, the veiled threats, the conspiracy to seize my property. I even have photos of the bruises on my face from Juliet slapping me right after the wedding. I looked at them all. If they want war, they'll get war, but it will be on my terms, with my resources, and with the truth on my side. Carlos smiled, genuinely smiled. Mrs. Hughes, I think it's time to strike. I agree, I replied, but there's something else I've decided to do, something I should have done years ago. They all looked at me with hope. I will reveal my entire story to the public, not just the wedding night, but everything. The years of manipulation, the financial dependency they created, their systematic attempts to strip me of my autonomy. I will show the world what greed can do under the guise of family love. The room filled with a new energy, the energy of people who knew justice was on their side and had the resources to make it happen. There's a show, Lucy said suddenly, pulling out her phone. Stories That Matter is an important talk show program focused on social issues. I have a contact there. Aunt Aurora, if you're determined to go public, this will reach millions of people. I looked into her eyes and slowly nodded. Set up the meeting. The legal battle was swift and ruthless. Carlos and the legal team had submitted counter-petitions so thoroughly and meticulously documented that Ethan and Juliet's request for a competency evaluation was not only denied, but dismissed in a prejudicial manner. The judge was particularly harsh in his ruling, stating that the evidence showed it was a calculated attempt to manipulate legal proceedings for financial gain, rather than a legitimate concern for the welfare of the alleged incompetent person. But the real victory came when we filed our own lawsuit, a civil case alleging attempted fraud, financial exploitation of the elderly, and defamation. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing the money I sent, emails between Juliet and real estate appraisers, text messages discussing their plan to seize my apartment, witness statements from Joseph, the building security guards, and the wedding photographer who videotaped Juliet's attack. And then the viral videos emerged, showing the truth of what happened that night, which have now been viewed over 2 million times. Ethan and Juliet's lawyers tried to reach a settlement within the first week. We refused. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about taking responsibility. It was about setting a precedent. It was about showing other vulnerable elderly people that they could fight back. The settlement we eventually accepted required the following, imposed on them by their own lawyers who saw they couldn't defend themselves. disclose the fraud attempt to the public, paying $45,000 in attorney's fees, agreeing to a restraining order preventing them from contacting me, to acknowledge in writing that all claims regarding my mental incapacity were false and malicious, agreeing to seek counseling regarding financial responsibility and elder abuse awareness. But perhaps most importantly, this case had caught the attention of members of Congress. And so 6 weeks after that dreadful night, I was sitting in a television studio preparing for the most important interview of my life. Ms. Hughes, we'll be going live in 3 minutes. Catherine Walsh, host of the program Stories That Matter, sat across from me in the brightly lit studio. For the past hour, she had been explaining the format of the program to put me at ease and telling me I could take a break if necessary. But now, as the cameras prepared to roll, I found myself feeling surprisingly calm. Behind the cameras, I could see Lucy, Carlos, Joseph, and Amelia, my support system, the family I had chosen. Remember, Catherine said gently, just tell your story. Be honest. That's all anyone needs to hear. The red light came on. Good evening, and welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm Catherine Walsh, and tonight we have a story that captivated the nation and sparked an important conversation about elder abuse within families. With me is 68-year-old widow Aurora Hughes, whose confrontation with her son and daughter-in-law at their wedding has been viewed millions of times. Mrs. Hughes, thank you for joining us on the program. Thank you for inviting me, I said, my voice sounding stronger than I expected. Let's start from the beginning, Catherine said, her tone compassionate yet professional. Take us back to that wedding night. What happened? I took a breath and began to tell my story. My bride slapped me in the face in front of 130 wedding guests because I refused to give her the keys to my apartment. For the next 45 minutes, I recounted my story on national television. I told them about the subtle manipulations that had lasted 2.5 years. I talked about the family intervention, where Juliet's family ambushed me in my own home. I talked about overhearing the phone call where Juliet called me naive and discussed her plan to take over my apartment. I talked about how I secretly paid her bills for months while they plotted to have me declared incompetent. And I told them about that slap. Catherine listened with the skilled attention of a journalist who understood she was witnessing something important. Her questions compelled me not only to explain what happened, but also why it mattered beyond my personal story. As the interview drew to a close, she said, Miss Hughes, your situation has sparked nationwide discussions about the financial abuse of the elderly by their own family members. What would you like to say to other seniors experiencing similar situations? I looked directly into the camera because I knew there were people out there who needed to hear this. I want to say this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are not powerless. With each word, my voice grew stronger. For so long, we were told that loyalty to family means accepting abuse. We were told that being a good parent means sacrificing everything for our children, including our dignity. Setting boundaries was called selfish behavior. I paused for a moment to let the weight of these words sink in. But I'm here to tell you that this is a lie. Love without respect is manipulation. Family obligations without honor are exploitation, and kindness that expects you to accept mistreatment is not kindness, it is coercion. Catherine slowly shook her head. You mentioned that you've been in touch with other families going through similar situations. Can you tell us about that? In the 6 weeks since the wedding, I've received over 300 messages, I said. 300 stories of adult children pressuring their aging parents for money, property, and control. 300 families where greed has replaced love. I pulled a letter from my bag, one of many I'd received and kept. This one is from Martha, 74, who lives in Ohio. Her daughter forged her signature on a reverse mortgage application. This one is from Harold, 71, who lives in Florida. His son convinced him to sign a power of attorney and then emptied his bank accounts. This letter, my voice faltered slightly, is from Eleanor. Her grandson threatened to take her grandchildren away unless she gave him a $50,000 loan she could never repay. Catherine's face took on a gloomy expression. What do you think needs to change? Legally, socially, culturally? Everything, I said simply. We need stronger laws to protect the elderly from financial exploitation, even if that exploitation comes from family members. We need mandatory reporting requirements for financial institutions suspected of abuse. We need public awareness campaigns so the elderly know they have options, that they can fight back. I leaned forward and looked directly into the camera again. But most importantly, we need to change the narrative. We must stop seeing older adults as a burden or a problem to be solved. We must remember that we are people with autonomy, dignity, and the right to make our own decisions about our lives, our homes, and our money. What about your son, Ethan? Catherine asked gently. Have you seen him since that night? That was the question I both feared and expected. No, I said quietly. He tried to reach out, tried to get in touch through intermediaries, but I'm not ready to talk, and maybe I never will be. Do you think you could forgive him? Knowing my answer would be scrutinized and debated, I thought carefully about the question. Forgiveness is complicated, I said finally. It's not like pressing a button or making a decision once and for all. Right now, I'm just focused on healing, not only from what happened, but also from feeling like I've been a problem for years, from being led to question my own judgments, my own worth for years. I looked into Catherine's eyes. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive Ethan, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean accepting him back into my life. It means letting go of the anger and not letting it poison me. And I'm not there yet. One last question, Catherine said as our conversation drew to a close. If your son is watching tonight, what message would you like to send him? My breath caught. Here I was, in the moment I both hoped for and feared. I looked into the camera and imagined Ethan watching somewhere, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. If you're watching this, I want you to know that I still love you. I will always love you because you are my son. But loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to treat you badly. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own dignity for their comfort. Loving someone doesn't mean becoming a victim of their greed. I paused. My tears were about to fall, but I didn't let them. The door to my heart will always be open, but right now it's locked, and only you have the key. That key is called responsibility. It's called true remorse. It's called striving to be the person I tried to raise you to be. This time, the pause was longer. I hope you find that key, Ethan. I truly hope so. But I won't wait forever. I can't wait, because I deserve to spend the rest of my years surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give them, living in peace. And for everyone watching, I added, addressing a wider audience, remember this: no matter your age, you have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to make your own decisions. You have the right to set boundaries with family members who treat you badly. And you have the right to stand up for yourself when those boundaries are violated. When the cameras finally shut off, the studio echoed with the applause of the crew members. Catherine embraced me, tears streaming down her face. Aurora, she said quietly, this was one of the most impactful interviews I've ever done. You're going to change lives with this. The impact of this interview surpassed everything I could have imagined. Within a few days, the interview had been viewed over 8 million times online. Major news outlets covered the story. Legal support groups reached out. And most importantly, lawmakers began to take notice. I found myself in a world I never expected to enter, the world of activism and advocacy. Amanda Porter, director of the Elder Rights Coalition, contacted me a week after the interview. Miss Hughes, since your story was published, 17 new cases have been reported in New England alone. 17 families who saw what you did and found the courage to speak up about their own situations. 17 became 50, 50 became 200, 200 became a movement. We formed a group called the Harrison Coalition, but I had objected to using my own name. You started this, Martha Chen insisted at our first organizational meeting. Martha was a retired professor whose son told people she was senile. Take responsibility. My breath caught. Here I was, in the moment I both hoped for and feared. I looked into the camera and imagined Ethan watching somewhere, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. If you're watching this, I want you to know that I still love you. I will always love you because you are my son. But loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to treat you badly. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own dignity for their comfort. Loving someone doesn't mean becoming a victim of their greed. I paused. My tears were about to fall, but I didn't let them. The door to my heart will always be open. But right now, it's locked, and only you have the key. That key is called responsibility. It's called true remorse. It's called striving to be the person I tried to raise you to be. This time, the pause was longer. I hope you find that key, Ethan. I truly hope so. But I won't wait forever. I can't wait. Because I deserve to spend the rest of my years surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give them, living in peace. And for everyone watching, I added, addressing a wider audience, remember this. No matter your age, you have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to make your own decisions. You have the right to set boundaries with family members who treat you badly. And you have the right to stand up for yourself when those boundaries are violated. When the cameras finally shut off, the studio echoed with the applause of the crew members. Catherine embraced me, tears streaming down her face. Aurora, she said quietly, this was one of the most impactful interviews I've ever done. You're going to change lives with this. The impact of this interview surpassed everything I could have imagined. Within a few days, the interview had been viewed over 8 million times online. Major news outlets covered the story, legal support groups reached out, and most importantly, lawmakers began to take notice. I found myself in a world I never expected to enter, the world of activism and advocacy. Amanda Porter, director of the Elder Rights Coalition, contacted me a week after the interview. Ms. Hughes, since your story was published, 17 new cases have been reported in New England alone. 17 families who saw what you did and found the courage to speak up about their own situations. 17 became 50. 50 became 200. 200 became a movement. We formed a group called the Harrison Coalition, but I had objected to using my own name. You started this, Martha Chen insisted at our first organizational meeting. Martha was a retired professor whose son told people she was senile. Take responsibility. The coalition grew rapidly. Within 6 months, we reached 500 members across 12 states. We established legal aid funds, support groups, and educational programs for financial institutions. We lobbied for legal changes. And we won. Massachusetts passed the groundbreaking Harrison Act, which increased penalties for financial exploitation of the elderly, required attorney approval for wills related to terminal illnesses, and protected family property. Vermont and New Hampshire followed suit within a few months. But the most satisfying work was personal, one-on-one meetings with people who needed to know they weren't alone. For example, Margaret, 74, had her bank account emptied by her daughter through a fake assisted living fund. Like Harold, a 71-year-old man, who was told that if his twin sons did not transfer the house to him, they would place him in a nursing home. Like 69-year-old Sophie, whose grandchild had stolen her identity and taken out loans in her name. We helped them confront each situation individually. We showed them, one by one, that they had the strength to do so. My apartment, once the source of conflict, had become the center of something meaningful. The guest room had become an office where I met with people who needed guidance. On the walls hung thank you letters, photos of families we had helped, and diplomas from the universities where I taught. 73-year-old Joseph had become the coalition's unofficial vice president. At our weekly planning meetings, he would joke, "I never thought I'd be the detective for dysfunctional families in my golden years, but this has been the most wonderful adventure I've ever had." Lucy had moved into the apartment next door after her divorce. Her 8-month marriage had ended when she realized her ex-husband cared more about her inheritance than her. "I should have seen this coming," she said the day she moved in. "But you taught me something important, Aunt Aurora. You taught me that it's never too late to walk away from someone who doesn't respect me." Amelia continued managing the real estate business, but now specialized in helping elderly clients protect their properties from greedy family members. "Your story changed my whole approach to work," she told me. "I realized I could do more good by preventing problems rather than just facilitating transactions." And Carlos? Carlos had become something of a celebrity in financial advisory circles. He gave talks at conferences about protecting vulnerable clients, wrote articles about fiduciary responsibility, and trained other advisors to recognize the warning signs of financial abuse within families. At 70, my life was richer, more meaningful, and more realistic than it had been at 68, just 4 months after my wedding. But there was still a big void. Ethan. The call came on Tuesday afternoon. When my phone rang, I was in the community garden I helped establish in my building, sharing information about medicinal plants with other residents. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me answer. "Mom?" Just one word. Her voice sounded older, harsher, carrying a weight it hadn't before. "I don't have a child," I said automatically, the response I'd been rehearsing for months. "You have the wrong number." "Please." The word broke mid-sentence. "Please don't hang up. I don't want anything. I want you to know something." Against my better judgment, I stayed on the line. "I heard you met someone," she continued after a long silence, "that you're working with some kind of coalition, helping other families." Silence fell between us. I wanted to say, "I'm happy. I'm happy that you've turned what I did, what we did, into something good, something important." "Why are you calling, Ethan?" My voice was icy. "To apologize." The words poured out of my mouth. "I know it doesn't matter. I know it won't change anything. I know it's too late. But you deserve to hear this. What I did, what we did, was unforgivable. I understand that now." "What do you want me to say?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I understand, that I know what I ruined, who I ruined while trying to be someone else." I closed my eyes and saw him at 8 years old, following Robert around the garden, asking endless questions. I saw him at 18, leaving home to go to college, promising to visit often. I saw the man he became, a man who valued money more than love, and paid a heavy price for it. "I hope you find peace, Ethan," I finally said, "but I can't give it to you. That's something you have to do on your own." "I know." Another long silence. "Juliet left me 6 months ago. She took everything we had left, which wasn't much, and disappeared. I haven't heard from her since." Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but a bigger part of me was just sad. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "Really?" His voice sounded surprised. "I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry your life is ruined. But Ethan, these are the consequences of your choices. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself." "I know," he said again, his voice almost a whisper. "I know." "Is there anything else?" I asked, not rudely, but wanting this conversation to end. Just thank you for answering, for listening, for not hating me completely. I don't hate you, Ethan, I said sincerely. I just didn't recognize you anymore. The son I raised wouldn't have done what you did. So while I mourn the loss of that person, I'm trying to understand the stranger you've become. Maybe one day, he began. Maybe, I cut him off, but not today, not tomorrow, maybe never, and you have to accept that. Before he could respond, I hung up the phone. For a few minutes, I stood there in the garden with the phone in my hand, feeling not forgiveness, but perhaps the slightest hint of forgetting. Not for him, for myself. I am now 70 years old. The Harrison Coalition has spread to 23 states and helped over 3,000 families. The Harrison Act has become a model law adopted by states across the country. We established a national helpline, legal aid networks, and training programs for law enforcement and financial institutions. But the work that makes me most proud is the smaller, more urgent kind. Last week, I received a letter from Margaret, whose daughter had stolen money from her. She had moved into a new apartment with the money she recovered through legal means. "Aurora," she wrote, "you taught me that setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's necessary for survival. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Yesterday, Harold called to say his sons had finally agreed to attend family therapy. "I don't know if we'll ever be close again," he said, "but at least they're trying to understand the mistake they made." This morning, Sophie sent me a photo of herself with her grandchild. The grandchild in the photo wasn't the one who stole money from her, but her younger brother who testified against her in court. Under the photo, it said, "We are rebuilding. Slowly, but we will succeed." These small victories, individual lives regained, dignity restored, families healed, or at least honestly broken apart, matter more than any law or national agenda. My apartment is now peaceful. The one knocking on the door is usually Joseph bringing coffee, Lucy bringing news about her new relationship, or Amelia bringing news about another client we've helped. Ethan never knocks on the door. I haven't communicated with him at all in the year since that phone call. From what I hear from Lucy, who occasionally checks in on him from afar, he's working as an accountant somewhere in the Midwest. He's remarried to a woman who seems determined and honest. He's in therapy, trying to understand how he became the person he is. Part of me hopes he finds what he's looking for, but a bigger part of me has accepted that his journey is no longer something I need to worry about. Sometimes people ask if I regret my harshness. They ask if I wish I had forgiven him, taken him back, given him another chance. The answer is complicated. I don't regret protecting what Robert and I built. I don't regret standing my ground. I don't regret showing others they could fight back. I don't regret setting boundaries that should never have been crossed. But am I sorry it came to this? That my son has become someone I no longer recognize? Did the slap I gave at the wedding mark the end of a relationship I've cherished for 35 years? Of course I regret it. Every parent wants to believe they will raise good people. Most do. But sometimes, despite all your efforts, the values you taught, and the love you gave, people make choices you cannot reach. And if those choices involve such a fundamental, calculated, and ruthless betrayal, forgiving is not a sign of weakness. Being resolute is strength. Last week, I received a package with no sender listed. Inside was a letter written in Ethan's distinctive handwriting. "Mom, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness, but my therapist says I need to accept what I've done without excuses or justifications, so I'm writing anyway. I ruined our family from money that never even reached my hands. I stood by and watched while Juliet treated you badly. I prioritized my greed over your honor, your safety, your life. I can't take that back. I can't go back and be the son you deserved. But I can say that I now understand what we took from you, what we tried to take, and I feel a deep, inadequate remorse. I read an article about the Coalition, the Harrison Act, and all the people you helped. I'm glad something good came out of my terrible mistakes. I'm glad your pain wasn't in vain. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But if there is a chance, not now, maybe years from now, but if there is a chance to talk again, to really talk, I want you to know that I will wait. I hope you are happy, Mom. Despite everything, despite me, I hope you have found peace. Your son, Ethan. I read the letter twice, then put it in the drawer with the other unopened cards and messages that had accumulated over the years. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe one day the wound will heal enough that I can offer not reconciliation, but acceptance, a conversation, a chance to build something new from the rubble of what was destroyed. But not today. Today, I have a meeting with state senators about expanding the Harrison Act. Tomorrow, I'll be speaking at a conference on senior rights. Next week, we're opening the coalition's 5th district office. At 70, my life is fuller, more meaningful, and more real than it ever was before that dreadful wedding night. I've learned that the end of a toxic relationship isn't a loss, but a liberation. I've also discovered that true family is chosen as much as it is inherited. I have proven that it is never too late to add a new chapter to your own story. This morning, I was sitting on my balcony drinking my coffee and watching the sunrise when Joseph came over with pastries and the news. "You won't believe this," he said, sitting down in the chair opposite me. "Remember that video from the wedding, the one that went viral? Someone has turned it into a documentary. They want to interview all of us, you, me, Lucy, Carlos, even some of the wedding guests. They've called it The Slap That Started a Movement." I almost laughed. "That's a terrible title." "I know," he smiled, "but it's true." We sat in a comfortable silence, eating pastries and watching the city below begin to wake up. "Have you ever wondered what would have happened if you had given them the apartment?" Joseph asked quietly. "If you had given up?" I thought carefully about the question. "I would have died," I said finally. "Maybe not physically, but everything that makes me me, my honor, my autonomy, my sense of self, would have been gone. I would have become exactly what they wanted me to be, a helpless old woman who needed their permission to exist." I looked back at him. "Giving up wouldn't have saved our relationship, Joseph. It would have only taught them that abuse works. It would have taught them that if you're persistent enough, you can break someone." He shook his head slowly. "I'm glad you fought back." "Me too. Last night, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened the box containing Robert's letters, the ones he wrote while courting me, during business trips, in the early years of our marriage, and I found the letter I was looking for. Dear Aurora, today you asked me what I think is the most important thing in raising our children. I thought about it all evening. I think it should be this: teach them that love and respect are inseparable. Family means treating each other with respect, not taking each other for granted. Kindness is not the same as being a doormat. Teach them that some boundaries are sacred. Teach them that some lines must never be crossed. Teach them that actions have consequences, especially within the family. And if they forget these lessons, my love, I hope you find the strength to remind them, even if it breaks your heart, especially if it breaks your heart. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to refuse to accept cruelty. Forever yours, Robert. He had written that letter 35 years ago. Somehow, he knew what today would bring. I carefully folded the letter and put it back in the box. "I did it, Robert," I whispered to the silent room. "My heart broke, but I did it, and I do it again." Here we are, the end of my story, or perhaps just the end of this chapter. You've heard everything. You've heard about the slap, the confrontation, the legal battles, the public advocacy. You've heard everything about a mother who chose justice over family, boundaries over blood ties, self-respect over her duties as a mother. Now decide, was I right? Was I too harsh? Was I cruel? Or did I finally, albeit belatedly, treat myself with kindness? The comments on these viral videos are still divided. Some see me as a hero. Others see me as heartless. Most are somewhere in between. They understand what I did, yet they are saddened by all this tragedy. I have made peace with this uncertainty. Because what I've learned is this. There are no perfect answers when it comes to betrayal within a family. There are no clear rules about when to forgive and when to walk away. There's no guidebook that tells you exactly how much abuse you should tolerate in the name of love. All you can do is make the best decision with the information you have and then live with the consequences. I chose to resist, to set boundaries, to demand respect, to show my son that actions have consequences, even when they come from someone who is supposed to love you. Was it the right choice? I think it was. But I also know it wasn't the only option. Every family, every betrayal, every person is different. What I want most is for my story to give others permission to make their own choices, permission to say no after saying yes for too long, permission to put themselves first when everyone expects them to be last, permission to understand that you can love someone and still refuse to be their victim. If you're watching this and see yourself in my story, if you're an elderly parent under pressure, manipulated, exploited, please know this. You are not alone. You are not powerless. No matter your age, you deserve dignity, respect, and autonomy. And if you are an adult child who sees your parent not as a human being but as a resource, if you see yourself in Ethan or Juliet, it is not too late to change. But change requires taking real responsibility, not just apologizing when you get caught. Before I finish, I want to answer the question everyone is asking. Have I forgiven Ethan? The truth is, I don't know yet. Some days, I feel only a distant sadness for the relationship we lost. Other days, I feel the memories of my old anger, my old hurt. And occasionally, rarely, I feel something that could be the beginning of forgiveness. But I know this. If forgiveness happens, it will be on my terms. It won't be for him, but for me. It won't be to fix what was broken, but to let go of the burden I've been carrying. And it will never, ever mean forgetting what happened. Another day of my new life is coming to an end. In a few minutes, Lucy will arrive for our weekly dinner. Joseph will bring dessert. Amelia will come with news about another family we are helping. My phone might ring with another call from someone who needs guidance, someone who saw my story and found the courage to share their own. Or it might stay silent, and I can spend a peaceful evening with the family that chose me. In either case, I am happy. I've learned that happiness isn't about having everything you want. Happiness is about wanting what you have. It's about building a life that reflects your values, even if it means losing the people you love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to walk away from someone who doesn't want to walk beside you with respect. Here's my final question for you. No matter where you are or what your story is, what would you do? If your children betrayed you like that, would you forgive them? Would you ignore it to preserve peace? Or would you, like me, choose justice over family, principles over blood ties, self-respect over society's expectations? There is no right answer, but you have your answer, and only you can decide. Thank you for listening to my story. If my story touched you, if you know someone who has suffered a similar betrayal, please share it. Tell them they are not alone. Tell them that being old does not mean being powerless. Tell them it is never too late to fight for your rights. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and write where you watched it in the comments. Share what you would have done if you were in my place. Would you forgive, or would you choose to remain as determined as I did? And above all, remember this. Some people see kindness as weakness. Some see love as permission to get what they want. Some believe that loyalty to family means accepting any kind of treatment, no matter how cruel. But these people are mistaken, and it's always too late, far too late, when they finally discover what true strength is, what real boundaries mean, and what the true consequences are. Well, that's when they learn the most important lesson. Never underestimate the silent power of a woman who has finally decided she has endured enough. My name is Aurora Hughes. I'm 70 years old, and I'm just getting started. As I finished recording these final thoughts, a text message came in from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading it, but my curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, made me open it. Mom, I know you probably won't respond, but I wanted you to know I've started volunteering at a counseling center for the elderly. I teach financial literacy to seniors and help them recognize the warning signs of domestic abuse. This is my way of trying to make amends for some of the harm I've caused. You were right about everything. It just took me a long time to understand that. I don't want forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become the person you raised me to be. Finally, I've been watching the message for a long time. My finger hovers over the delete button. Then, slowly, I press the button to save it. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe one day we'll have that conversation. Maybe one day I'll be ready to see if there's still a place for my beloved son, the stranger he's become, somewhere inside. But not today. Today, I have a life to live. I have a movement to build. I have people to help. I need to create a future that is entirely mine, without any regrets. There is a door of reconciliation, but it is up to me to decide whether that door will open and when it will open. And this, after 70 years, finally feels exactly right.